Have you ever faced a setback so big it felt like the absolute end of the world? Today, we're diving into the incredible story of a young man whose life was completely shattered by a single catastrophic event, only for him to find out that his darkest moment was actually a signal pointing him right toward his true destiny.
Okay, so let's get into it. First, we meet Vishal. Now, Vishal was a young guy just brimming with ambition. He wanted to start his own business, see the world, build things. But there was a pretty big problem. He was totally paralyzed by this deep-seated fear of failure and, honestly, a crippling lack of confidence. He was always listening to what other people thought he should do instead of listening to himself.
So let's explore what we could call Vishal's ordinary world. This is where his huge dreams were in a constant battle with his reality, mainly because he just wasn't paying attention to the signals his own life was sending him. And this led him down a career path that was never really his to begin with. Someone mentioned the merchant navy, because he liked to travel, and he just went along with it. But it didn't take long for the endless hours, the intense loneliness, and being so far from his family to just start grinding him down. He kept telling himself, it's fine, the money's good. And I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling, right? Settling for a life that pays the bills but doesn't really feed your soul. This was the first major lesson he'd come to understand later on. You have got to listen to your life.
And now we come to the event that changes absolutely everything. Somewhere out on the ocean between Indonesia and Australia, a violent cyclone slams into a ship. In just a few minutes, it's pure chaos. Water is flooding the deck, alarms are blaring, and the ship is going down. This wasn't just a storm. This was what you'd call a pivot point, a moment that would violently change the entire trajectory of his life.
The next morning, Vishal wakes up, half conscious, on the beach of a deserted island. For a split second, there's this incredible wave of relief. He's alive. But that feeling is almost immediately swallowed by a crushing wave of despair. He survived the shipwreck, sure, but now he is utterly and completely alone.
This is his absolute rock bottom. He's screaming at the sky, at the universe, at anyone who might be listening. He's questioning everything. He'd always tried to be a good person, so why was this happening to him? It is a moment of total, gut-wrenching crisis.
And right at that moment, just as he's about to give up all hope, he stumbles across something that will become both his lifeline and his greatest teacher. He finds an old wooden box that's washed ashore. He's hoping for treasure, of course, but what he finds inside is so much more valuable. A survival guide, basically a journal left by someone who was stranded there before him. And this book, it becomes his mentor. This is a perfect example of what's called an accidental apprenticeship, that uncanny moment when an unexpected teacher just appears out of nowhere to give you the exact knowledge you need right when you need it the most. For Vishal, this book taught him everything, from how to crack open a coconut to how to fish with a spear he made himself.
So this apprenticeship, it fundamentally forced him to change. I mean, just look at the shift from his before to his now. He had to shed all of his old passive identities. He wasn't just a sailor taking orders anymore, or a child who depended on his family. To survive, he had to become a fisherman, a builder, a strategist. He was creating what you might call a portfolio life, mastering a whole new collection of skills just to build a new existence from scratch.
So with all these new skills and this newfound confidence, Vishal starts to actually build a life for himself. He even manages to construct a small hut. But just as things are starting to feel a little bit manageable, the island decides to test him in the most brutal way you can possibly imagine. A sudden earthquake triggers a massive wave that just comes crashing onto the shore. And in an instant, the home he was so proud of building is completely gone, washed away. Everything he worked for, gone. And he's thrown right back into that pit of despair. He weeps, he curses the heavens, but this time, something's different. After the tears stop, this profound calm just settles over him, and he realizes he can rebuild it. This is such a crucial lesson, embracing painful practice. See, growth doesn't happen when things are easy. It happens when you have to face the agony of starting all over again, and you do it anyway. The pain doesn't just break him this time. It forges him. He rebuilds. But the universe wasn't done with him yet. One night, a storm rolls in, and a single blinding bolt of lightning strikes his last coconut tree. The one source of food and water he had left, it just bursts into flames. This feels like the final blow, the unbeatable challenge. He just surrenders, believing this is truly, finally, the end. He falls asleep, completely resigned to his fate. But the next morning, he's woken up by an impossible sound, the horn of a ship. His rescue is here, but the reason why they're here, that's the most crucial part of this entire story. So as he's pulled aboard, he asks the captain, how did you find me? And the captain replies, we saw your signal last night. And you can just imagine Vishal's confusion, right? He's thinking, signal? What signal? I didn't send a signal. I gave up.
And then the captain explains. They were miles off their normal course, but they saw this enormous fire from the burning coconut tree. They just assumed someone had lit it as a distress call and decided to come investigate.
So let that sink in for a minute. The lightning strike, the one event he was absolutely convinced was his final doom, was the very thing that saved his life. This was his ultimate pivot point. His greatest trial was, in fact, his salvation. The universe wasn't punishing him. It was answering his prayers in a way he never, ever could have imagined. When Vishal finally returns to India, he is a completely different person. He's not that timid, insecure boy who left all those years ago. No, he is a confident, fearless warrior forged in the fires of solitude and survival. And his story becomes legendary. He writes a book, he starts that business he always dreamed of, and he becomes an inspiration to millions. He realizes that without the shipwreck, without all of that despair and those trials, he never would have become the person capable of achieving any of it. The catastrophe was actually the catalyst for his magnum opus, his great work, the story and the life he was always meant to build.
And this just brilliantly illustrates all the wisdom he brought back with him. When you look at this list, you can see his entire journey laid out perfectly. These weren't random events. He learned to listen to his life when he felt trapped in that job. He found his accidental apprenticeship in the survival guide. He had to embrace painful practice to rebuild his home. The shipwreck and the lightning strike, those were pivot points he simply could not ignore. Every single lesson was a step that forged the person he became.
So now let's bring all of this back to you. Just take a second and think about the greatest obstacle you're facing in your life right now. The thing that feels overwhelming, maybe even completely impossible. And we'll end with this one thought. Just like that lightning strike that looked like the end for Vishal, maybe the very thing that you fear the most, the challenge that's bringing you to your knees right now, maybe it isn't there to destroy you. Maybe it's the signal pointing you exactly where you're meant to be.